Today, we're looking at the Jinnee desktop as part of our Battle of the Desktop series. If you want to install Jinnee Desktop on MiNT, and if you're following this series, do watch the configurations section because it was not as easy as I thought it would be. In fact, there's a kind of a trick to getting it to work. And the other thing we're going to do at the end of this, when we set up the Jinnee configuration in Xboot, is we're going to use a new trick that I've been taught by one of our channel friends, Adam, and I think you'll find it's really neat. Let's get some pixels on the screen and let's get some folders open. And as usual, our favorite folder is GemSys because it has a lot of files in it and some subfolders. What have we got here? Now, usually at this point, we're looking for a toolbar, and while there is one, it's not as fully featured as the toolbar was in Ease Desktop. Now, I find this strange because Jinnee is Ease Desktop successor. Written by the same company, it was the follow-up desktop. But it does have a couple of buttons on that toolbar. The first swaps between text mode and icon mode. And the second has the size to fit functionality that was in Ease Desktop. And that's a functionality that I think is very useful. Now let's go through the available options. So like thing, often used functionality is available on a right-click menu. So that's the second desktop that we've seen that has this right-click ability. So here we have New Object, which allows us to create either a folder or a file. Notice there is no group creation here. I was kind of disappointed by that. Jinnee just does not support the notion of groups. And I like that functionality in Thing Desktop and in NeoDesk. So it's kind of a little down check here for Jinnee. So let's create a folder and we'll see how we delete things. Let's call our folder Delete Me. And here it is. Now we could drag it to the trash. But what we're going to do is just use the option menu, right click, go down to delete, and away it goes. Now there's some weird behavior goes on here. It's some interaction between Jinnee and my AES, but it keeps pulling the window to the top of the dialogues when I'm doing things, and that's a bit of a pain, and I don't know why it's doing it. But the files are gone, but we've also got some artifacts on the desktop. So again, Jinnee's not happy with either True Color or Videl graphics or something. Back to our options. We can get information on a file, which we'll do in the usual way. We'll take an ordinary file, and as you can see, all this normal stuff is in here, whether it's been modified, what its attributes are. Interestingly, because the file system supports it and we're on MiNT, it gives us access rights to files, which as we go further down the MiNT route, we'll start using from the command line. The next menu is Select All, and clicking off a selected item unselects it. Or unselects all. And now we come to the visibility stuff, so we can show as text. And we do that by disabling show as icon, which is a bit strange. Now let's have a look at multi-column. Let's have a look at how things resize. Okay, so the window resizes when the whole file name is visible, but not when the whole of the file name plus the attributes are visible. So I'll just put some more stuff in here. So let's show some attributes. And again, we'll resize the window. And as I say, as soon as it can, as soon as the name fits, it shows the name, but it's not showing the size and the attributes. So this is better than Teradesc, which I thought was a horror when it came to this sort of stuff. It would just show you a fraction of the name, and you couldn't sometimes even realize there was a second column there. But it's not as good as Thing Desktop, which showed you a new column only when it could show everything, which I think is the way I like it to behave. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to be possible to do that using some of the settings in the configuration for Jinnee, because, oh boy, is there a lot of config. Let's have a look at sorting. We can sort by length, and then we can invert the sort. In Jinnee, that's termed backwards, which that's a kind of a strange way of putting it, but it does put the biggest at the top, so it works. Jinnee has one unique feature on this right-click menu. So I'm just going to go a little deeper into my file system to show you. If you see here, we're in GemSys MyAES Skins Default. And if we go to the Step Up option, it allows you to go back to any point in that hierarchy. So let's go up a couple of levels to GemSys in a single click. Neat. Now the Contents option allows you to go in the opposite direction and drill down. So from the current folder, we can navigate through the current folders and contents to its subfolders. If you click on a subfolder to open it, it opens it in a window size to fit. Very nice. Now you can do this type of navigation from different places. You can do it from within a window, like we're doing here. You can do it from a drive on the desktop, and in this case you can go all the way through the drive. or you can do it from the desktop itself. And as an aside, when you look at the information for a drive, you'll get the usual information plus drive geometry and a nice visualization of the amount of hard drive space available, just like you do in modern operating systems. But this is the first place I've seen that. And again, simple, usable, really nice. And I point out, I guess, that the dialogues have textured backgrounds, which is kind of attractive too. Now, something Jinnee does that really annoys me is it maps this button from being go back up a level as it is in all the other desktops to close the window. Now, I'm not a fan of that, and I'm fairly certain there'll be a configuration option that lets you turn that behavior off. And if I decide to use Jinnee as my desktop du jour, it will be off. By the way, if you do want to go up a level, there's a button in the toolbar to do that, and there's also this icon which you can click. So you have plenty of opportunities to do it. Now, I guess it's just a case of muscle memory. Right, let's get into the thick of it and have a look at some file operations. So here we've got a folder open with lots of files in it, and I'm going to open the U drive and we're going to go to the temp folder. So let's look at copy and paste. Let's pick a couple of files, right click and copy. Now go over to our temp folder, right click, and now you have insert and move. Insert means copy, move means move. Strange nomenclature here. I don't know whether that was just something in translation from the original German, but I don't know. All of these desktops seem to be written originally in German, and all of them have somewhat inconsistent translations. Okay, we select copy, and there's our files, and they should still be over there in the source folder in Gemsys because we copied them. So let's have a look at moving files. So what we're going to do is create a folder called dest, go into it, and then we're going to move the files that we've just copied rather than insert them. And when we go back up a level, we'll see that those files have in fact been moved. So that's all very good. And let's just do a little cleanup of those files. And again, if you notice, we're getting artifacts on the desktop, so Jinnee is not happy. So there are lots of other options on the right click menu. Let's show the attributes. Now this file has the archive bit set. From the attributes submenu, we can set or clear flags. So if I can make it read only here. And if you notice, the display updates, and now that file is read only. And I'm going to put that back because I really don't want to confuse myself in the future. We can also set the access rights for read, write, and execute for groups, others, and owners. Again, that's more minty. Actually, it might even be more Mac OS-y. I'm not 100% sure at the moment. And now plugins. So if I select some files and I go to plugins, I have all of these options. I can create different archive types, I can mime encode files, I can convert line endings, I can touch files, which should update the file modification time of those files. And if this functionality actually worked, it would be a real game changer. But it doesn't. I think it suffers from the same working directory issues that we'll see later. But again, something that I'll need to get working if there's any chance of this being my daily driver of a desktop. So we're going to do a tour of the menus now. And first of all, we have new object, which you've already seen, which allows you to create folders and files. But we've already done that, so I'm just going to skip it. The next is open. So if I had my assign.sys file here selected and I select open, nothing happens. To show this working, I'm going to associate QED with sys files. So I go to make it an application. It says, do I want to create a new app for QED, which I do. And the most important for me is this, multiple start. The values can be never, ask, pass parameters, or start. Now, I've explained this a few times in different videos about AV servers and stuff. And what we want to do is say pass parameters. So if QED is already running, the desktop just tells it to open the file. It doesn't start a new version of QED, which is good for memory consumption. Now, there's plenty of options on this dialog. What I want to do is to set it to open sys files. Now, we could use QED to show sys files, but that's a fairly heavyweight app loading just to show the file's content. And in the future, we might want to use some simple text viewer to show you sys files, and that would be lightweight and would load like lightning. So now if I select the sign.sys and double click it, it should open in QED, which it does. Next, we have the standard stuff we've already looked at. So information covered, copy, merge, insert. Now we haven't used merge in this video. Merge is a kind of a copy action where the newly copied items are appended to the previous set of copied items. So you can click on a few files, copy, go somewhere else in a folder, click on another couple of files, select merge, and you end up with one set of copied files that has all of them in. That's a really neat feature. We have delete, already done, select all, and find. Now find doesn't work. It calls out to a third-party search tool, and we haven't configured one yet. Now there is a find tool included in the distribution of Jinnee in the extras folder, but we'll only go there if we choose Jinnee as our desktop. Moving on in the menus, we've got the standard eject, quit, and shutdown. Let's look at masks and filters. So filters in Jinnee are not filters as they exist in other desktop. In Jinnee, the term used for what we normally think of as filters is masks. So let's say we only want to show sys files. We can set our mask to star.sys. This mask system is nowhere near as polished as Thing desktop. Thing automatically picked up all the extensions in the current folder and presented them as options for filtering, which I thought was brilliant. First of all, it works, star.sys. And if we go back to the mask dialog, we can save that mask as a predefined mask. Now, whenever we go back in, star.sys will be in there. Oh, if we remember to save the desktop, that is. Now there's this other option, filter. What's that? Filtering allows you to give Jinnee a list of files or wildcards that you don't want to see in any folder. And this is specified in the config dialog. So it's kind of the opposite of mask. It's not show me these, it's don't show me these. Another option in here is hide. And it's interesting. So if you're in a folder and you have a lot of files in there and you select just a subset of them and hit hide, it hides all the files that aren't selected. So that allows you to concentrate on a working set that you've selected within that folder. And then the rest of these options in the menu are pretty standard stuff. We can close all. We have cycle windows on Control W like we've had in all the other desktops. So let's have a little bit of Control W loving. And I mean, more usefully, I guess, cycle windows is useful in overlapping scenarios like this. Now we can duplicate a window, which is useful if we want to bifurcate our navigation. And then there's the pin option. The pin option is really badly named. What it allows you to do is select different display attributes and have them applied to the folder that you're in every time that folder's opened through the file explorer. So those attributes include things like if it's text mode, icon mode, what font to use, what masks are applied, whether filters are on, and even the position of the window itself. So you could select to always have GemSys appear at a certain place in the screen. Let's have a look at the special menu now. We have settings and applications, which we've already looked at. We can go into the icon manager, which we will do in a bit, and we can change resolution. Now, it doesn't like something about Videl graphics, something about MiNT or MyAES or whatever it is. So what it actually does when you click on it is crash the computer. I don't think we'll bother with that, shall we? Right. You can go directly into the Cobalt File Manager app, which I think was another product by Ash Software. And it's a file manager app. We've mentioned it before. We're going to cover it in a future episode. And you can load and save your desktop settings. Empty the waste bin, record a script. That's really useful, but absolutely beyond the scope of this video. And then Notepad, which we're going to get to in a second. So now what I'm going to do is what I usually do at this point. I'm going to go through the settings, and I'm not really going to particularly talk over them. But as you can see, what I'm going to do is page through them and give you a chance to freeze frame if you're interested in what options are on any particular page. And boy, as I said before, there's a lot of them. So what's left here is icon editing and the Notepad. Now Notepad is, well, we saw this option in Ease Desktop and I really liked it. So let's create a desktop note. We can pick the paper color, but notice our nice massive 256 color palette for these things. So we'll have that as blue, and then we'll go for a text color that's this yellow, and that gets us some lovely CPC 464 action going. And notice the nice translucent dragging of the node, which we get whenever we move it. That's really cute. That's really cute. And you can double click a note to edit it, delete it, etc. I'm going to go out on a limb at this point and state categorically that out of the box, Jinnee is the most attractive of all the desktops we've seen so far. It's got solid support for 256 color mode icons, and I would say if you don't want to do any icon management yourself, it's beautiful and fit for purpose. The problem comes when you decide you do want to do some icon management. So let's have a look at the icon manager, shall we? And prepare yourself for some disappointment. So how this should work is, over on the left here is a list of all the icons that are available. And I don't know if you can spot something, but there are certainly a lot more icons showing on the right than there are shown to be available on the left. The problem is it's just not rendering them. For example, if I go in here and I drag, there's obviously an icon under there because it's putting a drag box around it. And if I go here, they're there. They're just not visible. So let's look at how it should work if the icons were visible, shall we say. If we quickly navigate in the file system where the icons are stored, we see the resource files that form the groups on the left. So those icons are coming from those files. You can add your own files if you wish to. So you can add and remove icons in these resources, and then you can assign them to rules via this tool. Well, if you could see them, which you can't. On the right top, we have the rules. These are very similar to rules in other desktops. So right-clicking a rule edits it. And here we see it's a folder rule. It matches two patterns that are complete file names, no wildcards. It isn't marked as a desktop variant, so this rule is shown when looking at a folder in the Explorer window. Now, if we look at the U drive rule, it's marked as being a folder rule and as a desktop variant, so that's the icon that you'll see for the U drive on the desktop. Now, for drives like the C drive that can be seen both on the desktop and in Windows, it's possible to have two different rules and appearances depending on where they are. Now, the open variant is a bit niche. It says that this icon is for when a folder is in the open state. And the only application that I saw for this is for the disclosure indicator in the hierarchical view. So, as I say, to be ignored, I think. Now, the entry window has these checkboxes associated with each item, which allows you to quickly toggle if the rule is case sensitive for the first one, an open variant for the middle one, or a desktop variant for the end one. And you can see, if you look down the list, that applications have both a mini icon and a main icon. And we can change the icon assignment for a rule by dragging an icon from the list on the left to the rule. We do that, and there it is, changed. For file rules, we have rules for fixed file names. So let's go find, is there something for a wildcard? So if we scroll down, yeah, there's the rules for files ending in .tlm and .tlx. And as you can see, there are a lot of pre-built icons in this layout, including my favorite for tech. Love that app. Now I can see the power of this, but it's not working for me, unfortunately. I've tried booting into MiNT in 256 color mode. That didn't work. I've tried running it from Emutos in 256 color mode. That didn't work. So icon management in Jinnee is a complete and utter failure for me. Now, I might be able to get away and live with what's just currently defined, but I think it's a massive down check for me. I mentioned earlier that the configuration of Jinnee Desktop on MiNT was not as easy as I thought it would be. So what I'm going to show you here is how I installed it first and what happened. And I'll try to do this at the hurry up. And then I'll show you how I fixed up that install. So Jinnee comes with a really good installer. It's pretty much just next. There's lots of extras and stuff like that. The only non-default setting I'll use in this little passage is to change the language to English, because this is fully localized into different languages. And I'm going to install it where it wants to go, into C/Jinnee. So I'm guessing that's where it's going to be happiest to run from. Now at the end of the install, we get an error about not being able to open the README file. That's just because we haven't got a file associated with .text. Don't worry about it. So let's have a look what happens when we run Jinnee from the Thing desktop as an app within an app sort of thing. And there we go. It looks great. It works. Ship it. Yep. However, the next step that we always do when we're doing one of these installs is we add it to our desktop.cnf file. We set the AV server and stuff like that, and then we reboot it. So let's do that. And I'm going to do that again pretty quickly. So I'm going to save it as desktop.cnf. Then I'm going to save it as dt_jin.cnf for later use with Xboot. So now that we've done that, this is just a normal matter of rebooting. When we go into Xboot, we're going to run the MiNT config. And what that does is it doesn't overwrite the desktop.config. It boots with whatever's in there, which in my case will be Jinnee. And then we should see Jinnee working in its nice, beautiful 256 color mode. Now that is not a good sign. And this is a terrible sign. Now, I could go through the almost 2 days of faffing around that I did trying to fix this. To me, all the way through it, it was almost like it had lost its sense of its current working directory. But if I run a second copy of Jinnee under Jinnee, see how the desktop icons now work? And I think that's because when I run it from a window, it knows where its current working directory is. What I did, if you go into Save Desktop, you can see that it's in the Jinnee folder. But if we quit out of the extra copy of Jinnee and go back to the original non-working one, and we go to Save Desktop there, its actual working directory is gemsys myaes desk. And that begs the question, do we need to put the icons in the desk folder and have the Jinnee files in another place, which I really don't want, or do we reinstall it into that location, which in the end is what I decided to do. So here we are back in our Jinnee desktop where we were before we started talking about installation. And here everything is working nicely. So what did I do? Well, I did what I said I was going to do. I ran the installer again, only this time I selected as my install directory gemsys myaes desk. And then I modified my I modified my dt_gin.cnf and set it to the correct path. So this works, but what I don't like is that now I have desktops all over the map on my hard drive. I originally wanted all of the desktops to go in a single folder rather, called desktops, and I've ended up with them in 4 different places. So I now have Ease in the root of the C drive, because that's all where it would work from. Jinnee in the myaes desks folder, as we've just seen. Thing desktop under desktops. It's well behaved. It's the only one that would run where I wanted it to. And Terradesk, which is currently under MiNT, but that's kind of like just the default of where it was installed from. And this is far from ideal. I promised earlier some sort of exciting Xboot configuration knowledge. So let's configure Xboot to allow us to boot into Jinnee as an option, as we have for the previous ones. So in previous desktops, we created a script for the Xboot set that said, copy the config for this desktop over the top of desktop.cnf. And I was doing that quite happily. It seemed to be working quite well. Then channel viewer Adam, and there he is, mentioned there's a really neat trick. Now, I knew that you could have alternatives for your new desk.inf file and your assign.sys file on a set-by-set basis. But he pointed out that there's a blank entry. And in fact, there's nothing special about the upper 2 of these. You can set them to whatever files you want. It's just config. So what I want to do is I'm going to use that blank entry to override desktop.cnf with dt_gin.cnf. So let's create a new config and call it MiNT Jinnee. Jinnee? Call it MiNT Jinnee. And let's look at the parameters dialog. Info file 1 is new desk.inf and info file 2 is assign.sys. So we can use info file 3 to set our desktop.cnf. So we navigate to the file we want to use in that slot. So when we click OK, we go out, and now if you notice at the bottom, we have an entry here for our desktop.cnf. So let's click the empty entry and set the file we want to use for desktop.cnf for our Jinnee set. And we do this via a nice file explorer, and this removes the chances of errors and, making mistakes through fat-fingered typing. So let's save that and let's reboot. Hey, and it works. Now, I'm going to patch up all of the previous desktops to use this new mechanism. So when you guys download the disk image for this episode, if you choose to, and have a play with it under Hatari, you will see that the new system is in place. And I think that's a really good suggestion to use this technique. And I'd like to thank Adam again very much for making that suggestion. So that's the end of our brief tour around the installation, configuration and usage of Jinnee Desktop. Now, normally I put in a 1-line summary of the desktop, and then I follow that with a reminder that I'm going to do a wrap-up episode in a couple of videos time, where I do a compare and contrast across all of these desktops. And then we're going to have a vote on which one we think is best. So here's my 1-line wrap-up of Jinnee. Jinnee is a really beautiful desktop that I just wish behaved under MiNT and myaes as well as it did under Magic. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.